Welcome to the Empowered Flow podcast. I'm Tris Alexandra, holistic clinical nutritionist, women's health and menstrual cycle educator, and mama. Join me and experts in nutrition, fitness, mindset, and holistic healing as we explore conversations to open your mind to a different way of thinking on all things women's health, hormones, periods, cyclical living, and fertility. Whether you're seeking knowledge, inspiration, or a supportive community, you've found your tribe. Let's dive in. Men are often forgotten about when it comes to their health and fertility, but with fertility rates declining worldwide and sperm count having decreased globally by 50% in the past 50 years, men's health and fertility is a conversation we all need to be having. This week, I chat with qualified naturopath, strength coach, and men's health coach Andy Lucas, who flips mainstream men's health on its head to help men thrive. Andy has created the Healthy Man Method, a no BS framework built on the basic foundations of well-being, the stuff that actually works, with 6 simple steps for improving your gut, your sex life, and your performance. This method fast-tracks Andy's clients' healing journey so they can achieve a better existence. Andy is also the author of Blood Chemistry: How to Interpret Blood Tests for Optimal Health, available on his website andylucas.com.au. In this episode, we dive into what the mainstream tells us about health that is BS, the importance of optimizing men's health and hormones, the impact of heat and cold exposure on men's health, the impact of endocrine disrupting chemicals, why we can't forget about men when it comes to preconception prep and how they can optimize their fertility, and so much more. Hey, Andy, welcome to the Empowered Flow podcast. It's so good to have you here.
Great to be here.
I'd love you to share for our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
No worries. So my name's Andy Lucas. I'm a clinical naturopath. We actually studied together, even though we didn't really cross paths.
Yes.
So studied at Southern School of Natural Therapies. I guess just a quick bit on my history. Before I got into studying naturopathy, I was a personal trainer. I've done so for about 15 years. And it was actually one of the things that led me back into study, because it was very kind of the case where you learn when you spend so much time with clients, you can actually have a significant influence on their day-to-day lives and their health. And you could see in the industry that like people were giving it bad advice and doing more damage than good. And it was one of those rabbit holes. The more that I learned, the more that I wanted to know, the more I realized I could actually genuinely help people, and hence my journey into naturopathy. I started studying that when I was doing the PT work. I've kind of branched off very much into the men's health space. I will say most of my clientele, at least half of my clientele, is still women, so I do work with women. It's just
Awesome.
very hard to get men in. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my background. I studied health sciences straight out of high school, dropped out of that, became a carpenter, then became a personal trainer, and then became a naturopath. So I kind of went full circle in that kind of scenario. End up back in the health field where I kind of always thought I would. So
Yeah, awesome. And did you have any experience, like, I guess, personally with seeing a naturopath yourself, or having, sort of any experience in that regard before studying?
Actually, it was probably one of the triggers that kind of really instigated me signing up for uni. And I was going through some health issues myself, especially my early, basically when I turned about 31, 32. I went through a rather nasty kind of relationship breakdown. My health went to absolute bollocks, to the point where I was struggling to stay awake. I was working as a personal trainer, and I was finding myself leaning against walls, like left, right, and center. I couldn't stand up properly. So it was a friend that actually put me onto a naturopath, Phil Watkins, who was working in South Yarra at the time. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit more to, like, I thought I knew a lot about health, but the more I kind of worked with him and the more I kind of dug into things and went a little bit further, really started to kind of grow my knowledge and realize there's a lot more to it than just eating good food. And I think from there, that's kind of what got me into it.
Yeah, cool. Something I saw on your website, you have a message on it that says, everything mainstream tells us about health is bollocks, which I absolutely love. I would 100% agree with that. But just on that, like, what are some of the key things that maybe men or people are not aware of that we get wrong when it comes to men's health specifically?
I mean, a lot of the stuff outside of going to men's health specifically, it kind of carries over to so much of the rest of the
Yeah.
population. But I guess some of the big things that I kind of focus on, even though I'm a naturopath, like for me, nutrition, especially with men, is so paramount. Like some of the messaging, like where they're sitting there saying that, we should only have 2 serves of red meat a week. We need to ensure that you eat less calories and move more because that's going to make you fitter and healthier and stronger. It is absolute bollocks. A lot of the studies and research that showed that red meat was bad for you included all processed meats in the same category as a piece of steak. Now, if you put the two of them under a microscope, they're completely different, let alone before you put them into someone's gut. Now, that's one thing that kind of really irritates me. And also, too, like a lot of the clients that I work with, probably 90% of them are all massively under eating. What a lot of people forget is when we live in the world that we live in today, when we're working 8, 10, 12 hours a day, we're chasing up kids, family, partners, etc., we're incredibly stressed. Now, when that cortisol stress response occurs, that requires more energy. Now, if you're eating less calories than your body's actually burning, the body's going to turn catabolic and start to break itself down. So especially from a men's health perspective, if you're talking about muscle degeneration, lowering of testosterone, lowering of mood, lowering of energy, cognitive function, all these things suffer if you're actually not getting enough nutrients in to support what you're putting out. So for me, when it comes to working, especially with men, the best results I get are literally when I'm starting to jack up men's calories, quite a bit more than anyone in mainstream will ever say. And all of a sudden they perform better, they look better, they lose weight. That's the crazy part about it. I can put a guy on an extra 1,000 calories a day and watch the weight fall off him. It's really sad. Well, it's fantastic to see, sorry, but sad that the media is kind of pushing it down that path.
Yeah, I think that's such a big message to share with people too, because I see it too, like a lot of under eating because we don't realize how much we need to like fuel and nourish. And particularly when you have, whether it's women or men in the gym training, doing whatever exercise that they do on top of their everyday lifestyle, and then they're not fueling around that as well. Did you see that a lot when you're even as a personal trainer?
It's one of the biggest things I saw as a personal trainer because everybody comes in with the same message about eat less, move more, and you'll lose weight. What people completely forget that once you're in a caloric deficit, like hormone production is going to suffer massively. Energy levels are going to crash. So you might notice an initial kick, but how far can you drop your calories before your body generally starts to break itself down? And this is where you see so many people with chronic injuries. They can never shake those last 5 kilos. And like I said, when you start to throw more calories in their body, as long as it's the right type of foods, nutrient dense, whole foods, foods from the earth, all of a sudden the body starts to thrive again. And if you're moving and training well, then the body actually the weight just drops off naturally. And it's really kind of sad because, and also too, like relative to that, like some of the messaging that gets thrown out there today about, the dad bod being healthy and, up your curve, so to speak, I just don't see, it's just not healthy. So I think we really need to take a big step back and look at what we put into our bodies, how we move, and are we getting enough to support what we're actually doing? Because when the body turns catabolic, when things start to break down, that's what leads us down that path of illness and disease.
Actually, I want to go into the nutrition thing because I'd love to hear a bit more about, like, I guess your philosophy on nutrition and eating a whole foods diet and what that looks like. Because I think for a lot of people, even that it's a concept that they may not be fully understanding of. Like, what does that actually mean?
It's a really nuanced conversation because I love the saying one man's food is another man's poison because it's so true. We all come from different ethnic backgrounds, especially here in Australia. Our microbiomes are completely different. Like having worked with so many clients doing stool testing and just learning and understanding the difference between one person and another who literally might be brother and sister. They can be so different. But I guess, relative to that, like if we're not getting enough nutrient-dense food in our diets just as a general purpose, then our bodies can't thrive. Now, I generally, for most clients that are in a state of, say, chronic fatigue or ill health, we need to focus on healing the body. So to heal the body, we need nutrients and minerals and amino acids that are actually going to support this type of healing, not things like refined carbohydrates and sugars and alcohol, which are actually going to cause more damage and more inflammation than they'll do any good whatsoever. And I think that's the big thing we need to look at. So initially when I work with a lot of clients, I do tend to, depending on the individual, of course, but the majority of the time we are going down a more higher protein, higher fat-based diet. And you tend to see that the body really thrives because you're giving it the minerals and nutrients, once again, that it needs to heal, especially at a cellular and a muscular level. And, once the body's in a better state, once it's leaner, once it's less inflamed, its tolerance to dealing with things like refined carbohydrates and, those nasties or those 10 to 20% things that, mainstream says it's okay to have some here and there, the body can tolerate that stuff better. But until you get it to a point of health, if we're constantly throwing in that 20% of crap, you're banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, for sure. And look, our food system is just like, it's so different to, what it used to be going back 20, 30, 50 years ago. I walked into a supermarket the other day and I feel like every time I see something new that's popped up in the supermarket, I think, what are they making for people? Like, how are we feeding people this crap?
It's really scary to see. And, when I first started going down the organic food, free-range food, that kind of health realm, I'm sure many people that have done that, you tend to develop this little bit of, it's a horrible thing to say, but a little bit of arrogance when you're looking around at other people's shopping baskets. And you sit there, look at yours, which is full of fresh food, meats, proteins, fruits, all those kinds of things, compared to processed crap, biscuits, chips, pastas. But a lot of people are taught that that stuff's okay.
Yeah.
But yet they're 10, 15, 20, 30 kilos overweight, their skin's a mess, they've got no energy, but they're told it's okay, but it's not. And
food marketing has a lot to answer for that.
It really does. And I think quality is so essential these days because the divide between good food and bad food is getting worse and worse. The products that they're using in a lot of the produce, the processed foods these days, is absolutely disgusting. I always go off the simple premise, if you cannot pronounce it, don't put it in your body. And I think there's just too much that out there at the minute that people just aren't aware of and how bad it is for you.
I often say when it comes to women's health, that an optimally fertile body is an optimally healthy one. Would you agree with this with men's health? And do you think men should be thinking about like optimizing their hormones, their testosterone, regardless of whether they're thinking about having babies? Like, what's the connection there?
100%. One thing I'll say relative to men versus women, men's health is probably slightly less complex than women's, especially from a hormonal perspective. But it doesn't take away from the fact that what you said, like an optimally fertile body, is an optimally healthy body. So a lot of the work that we should be focusing on, especially for men, is things like if you increase a man's testosterone, he's going to be mentally and cognitively much more efficient. His energy levels are going to be better. His mood's going to be better. His performance physically, whether that's on the sporting field, at work, in the bedroom, it's all going to improve. And as a byproduct of that, as we're making a man healthier, like that's going to help with sperm health. That's going to help with libido. That's going to help with everything required to make babies, just as a natural byproduct. I mean, there's a lot of things out there, obviously, that we want to look at avoiding, and we'll kind of dig into that, can dig into that in a second. But at the same stage, if we focus on trying to build up testosterone levels, reduce body fat, improve cardiovascular performance or endurance, all these things are going to contribute to being a more fertile man.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the things that men need to consider reducing, avoiding when it comes to their health?
I think as a general rule, men and women need to kind of really take a look around the house and look at what we're exposing ourselves to regarding, especially in things of like chemicals and plastics. So many of these things cause so much detriment to kind of how hormones are produced, regulated, signaled. And I think by simply eliminating as much chemical exposure as possible, that will help to stabilize a lot of the hormonal production. I mean, there's a couple other things that obviously that men need to really look at kind of addressing too. And it's like also too, heat exposure for men is like super detrimental to sperm health. So if you're thinking of conceiving, there's a lot of research that shows infrared saunas are absolutely brilliant for health and inflammation and detoxification, but they're also very bad for your sperm. So for a lot of guys that are looking to conceive, then I sit there and say, sauna's not bad, but at this point in time, we want to keep the boys out of the sauna. We want to keep them away from that kind of heat because we're actually going to damage sperm production or damage the DNA and the health of the sperm.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. And I know actually, so I know my husband won't mind me sharing this, but when we were doing preconception care, like prep for our first, so I've got a nearly 3-year-old, this is back before cold plunges and like ice bars were a big thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, a few years back, and my husband was doing his own research as well as some of the things that I was recommending for him, and decided that he would ice his balls and do that to keep cool and do that. I don't know if you've heard about the protocols about icing the balls.
Yep.
So he did that for our first preconception prep. And then obviously since then he's gotten really into the cold plunging, and he built his own ice bath at home, which is like
Yeah.
phenomenally cold. But yeah, I'd love to talk about cold plunging and your thoughts around, because you talked about the heat exposure, but what about like cold exposure as well?
Cold exposure is brilliant for testosterone, for sperm health, for men, just in general. And I think in regards to icing the balls, I always like to credit one of our colleagues from university, Lucas.
I think that's where he got it from.
He was big on this stuff all over socials before we got a hold of it, and to this day, he's kind of, some people still remember him as the guy who freezes his balls. But I've personally tried it myself, and I've noticed impacts in terms of kind of, especially for the men that are listening, like in terms of the old fella and a little bit better circulation, being completely honest and out there. Like when I was doing it for a period of time, I would wake myself up in the middle of the night when I was turning over because he was awake, and it was just uncomfortable when you're rolling over in the middle of the night.
Right.
Because as most people know that theoretically, as a man, we should be waking up. We should be waking up erect. That's a sign of a healthy testosterone-filled man. But this was happening in the middle of the night, and I'd be consistently waking myself up, which is very annoying because I just wanted to sleep. But back to the actual point of the benefits of it. Like, it's been shown to increase testosterone production. It's very, very good for the circulation, because the vasodilation, the vasoconstriction of all the vessels that run down to our nether regions, that kind of opening and closing actually promotes better circulation, which leads to better waste clearance. Now, one of the big issues when it comes to fertility, as I mentioned before, is it's toxins, it's chemicals, it's free radicals that damage the sperm themselves, that the accumulation of that, especially down there, is going to cause more damage than good. So with the cold therapy, as I said, the flushing of all that crap out of the blood vessels actually helps to eliminate a lot of waste. So that's really good. I mean, it's been shown to reduce inflammation, which is going to help all across the body as well, but also it's going to help with sperm quality. Now, if you're trying to conceive, or you're in that preconception mode of trying to build your sperm up to be as healthy as possible, like, it's just one of those many tools that we can use to kind of help increase the quality of our sperm.
Because you talked about sauna being, whilst saunas are really great for overall health, but potentially that heat exposure is not amazing for testosterone and sperm health. But I think some of the other things that men are maybe doing that they might not be aware of that could be, impacting that heat exposure could be even things like laptops on your lap all the time. Like, what are some of the other things that they need to think about in terms of heat exposure?
This is actually, it's a really important one, because I tend to be hypersensitive to electronics. Like, I can't even wear an eye watch without feeling it on my skin. So anytime I put my phone in my pocket, which I don't do anymore, like, I feel the sensation around the boys. So straight away I'll pull that out, and I tend to carry it around in my hand. But I mean, simple things like I said, like keeping your laptop off the boys. Don't let it sit on the lap, because that heat exposure from the laptop is going to do damage to the sperm. Same with the phone in the pocket. There's other things that can be detrimental too. Like, if you're not wearing natural cotton fiber underwear, if you're wearing synthetic things, that's going to cause more heat, more sweating, more accumulation, more damage once again to the sperm. Also to cycling, great for cardiovascular fitness, but the friction, you're wearing Lycra, the friction on the seat, it's very, very bad for sperm health. And I mean, just for your testicles in general. I mean, we don't know if Lance Armstrong's cancer was due to his riding or the other things that he was putting into himself, but there is a high relevance or high connection between testicular cancer and cycling, and prostate cancer as well. So we need to be very careful about what we're putting in and around that region, especially if we're trying to conceive. And I think simple things like that, wear cotton underwear, make sure you're not exposing your boys to too much heat, and if you do, have a cold shower to kind of balance it out so they're not, overheating and sweating too much.
Yeah, for sure. I want to backpedal a little bit, because I know we've started to talk about fertility and preconception care when it comes to men's health. And I think it's so important, because they tend to get forgotten about. You guys do. Like, we think about fertility and we think about, the women have to do all this work and prepare their bodies to get ready for pregnancy, and men sometimes get forgotten about. Why is it so important to do preconception prep for men?
Especially in today's world. Today's world is becoming increasingly more and more toxic. Testosterone levels are more than 50% lower than what they were back in the 70s. You know, the old theory that our grandfather at 60 years old had higher testosterone than us today at 25 years old is actually true. It's kind of scary. So relative to like trying to conceive and preconception care, like it becomes super, super important because our sperm are nowhere near as healthy as they once were because they're just exposed to so many chemicals, pollutants, nasties that are causing damage, whether that's at a structural level or a DNA level, which really impacts our ability to kind of conceive when the sperm hits the egg. And one of the real big misconceptions is that the onus is actually on the women. If they're having troubles conceiving or they have an early pregnancy loss, that it's the woman's fault. It's because she couldn't carry the baby, her eggs weren't good enough. When literally the stats, you know, there's a lot of different statistics out there, but it's likely at least 50% on the men. You know, if our sperm can't swim in the right direction, if the DNA in the sperm isn't actually healthy enough to fertilize an egg properly, then you're never going to be able to have a baby. So I think we really need to have a big discussion around the importance of preconception care relative to men, because we're half the equation. You know, once the job is done, okay, then us boys can probably relax a little bit, but we need to ensure that our sperm are actually healthy and able to fertilize the egg. Yeah, it's one of those things that really just gets missed, and I think there needs to be a much, much bigger discussion about it. And we need to take more ownership as men, you know, about this, because so much pressure gets put on girls trying to conceive, and when something goes wrong, it's their fault. When, like I said, 50% of the time, it's our fault.
Yeah. And it's not just we think about it as in the terms of like not just important for the ability to fall pregnant, but also the health of the baby and child, because that's like, you know, half of that is the DNA and everything coming from the sperm to create this new life as well.
Yeah, and doing a lot of work in fertility that I do, especially working with men, is when you run like a sperm sample testing, like it's the easiest test to run. Like I've done it before, just to trial and error, and you get stuck in a room with a TV and a selection and a cup and away you go. It's quite a strange experience. But a lot of the time when they're running these tests, one of the big things that they're not testing for is DNA fragmentation. So basically how much the DNA within the sperm is actually being damaged, how healthy the DNA is. Because you might have millions of healthy sperm that can easily fertilize an egg, but if the DNA in the sperm itself is actually no good, if it's damaged, if it's impaired, that, like I said, can lead to early pregnancy loss. It can lead to birth defects. It can lead to a whole myriad of issues that we don't want to have to deal with, especially when we're trying to bring a new life into the world. So I guess, like, relative to this, if we go back to, as you're saying about preconception care, like it's generally somewhere between a 70 to 80 day process from the day of what they call mitosis, when cellular division begins of the sperm, to actually the fully maturation and the availability of the sperm to be released and to fertilize an egg. And that's just from day one. What people don't realize is if you're not taking it back, 3-4 months at least to actually clear your body out, to increase your testosterone levels, to remove as much inflammation and toxicity as possible, so your sperm have a healthy environment to grow in, that's going to impact, once again, your ability to actually conceive and maintain a healthy pregnancy and child.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that timing as well, because I think, we don't realize how long in advance we should be really considering this and thinking about doing some preconception prep and really getting in. And I think the benefits anyway, it's preconception prep. Yes, it's for fertility and for a healthy baby, but at the same time, your overall health, you're going to feel incredible by making some changes to, your nutrition and lifestyle as well.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's what I mentioned earlier. Like, for most men, making these changes outside of, like, when we're working specifically with fertility, there's a few different supplementation that you might use specific for sperm health. But as a general rule, the things that are going to help you become more fertile and make your sperm healthier are going to make you a healthier, stronger, fitter, more energetic man anyway. Theoretically, the process of making a baby should be better and more fun because you should get better at it because you're healthier and fitter. So everybody wins there. But I think as a man specifically, like, where's the downside? You're going to be healthier. You're going to potentially have a healthier child. The pregnancy is going to be easier for your partner. It's just a win-win situation.
And so you touched on environmental toxins and also like heat and cold therapy in the sense of like men's health and preconception fertility. What other areas do you specifically look at or do you think are really important for men to consider when it comes to this, improving their health?
I think outside of the general health aspect, one thing that we really need to kind of focus on and take note of is, and it's a big topic these days. I think it's, especially the last couple of years, it's really kind of come forefront in the health industry, is what's known as endocrine disrupting chemicals. Basically, what they are synthetic chemicals that when they get into the system, they actually can mimic hormones, whether that's testosterone, whether that's estrogen, and effectively alter hormone function within the body at a biochemical level, whether that's blocking receptor sites so things can't attach properly, altering hormone metabolism, or even, as I said before, disrupting like signaling between hormones and between proteins and everything that's required to in that whole kind of testosterone hormone building process. And I think there's a lot of talk out there about going BPA free, eliminating phthalates, but just because one type of BPA is better than the other doesn't mean the others are all crap.
Mm.
So as a general, one of the things I get pretty much all my guys to do, as I said before, is you've got to throw out your chemical-based cleaners, skincare products, etc. Switch from using plastic, especially never heat plastic, whether it's a water bottle, whether it's food. That stuff is so bad for the system. I heard a study the other day that basically said we are currently consuming approximately a credit card size worth of microplastics each week.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
That is a lot. So when you think about it, and the problem with a lot of these microplastics is they're so hard for the body to actually detoxify and get out if the body can.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're sitting in the system for long periods of time, they're actually really disrupting hormone production at a biochemical level. You can imagine the impact on your health and actual capacity to basically conceive.
Yeah, and the plastics is heating plastics. You mentioned food in plastics is such a big one because I think it's such a norm for people to do, particularly. I've got a bit of a background in not working in the fitness industry, but being in that industry, and just the amount of people that are still heating food in plastic containers is phenomenal.
Yeah. I was working in a gym last year, and I walked in. I started working in their place, doing a little bit of PT work and some consulting, and they had the microwave out the back. And the first thing I said to the guys there, I was like, "I'm going to buy a toasty oven, and we're going to stop using this microwave." And a couple of guys jumped on board. A couple of others were a bit stubborn and refused to kind of switch over. But I still maintained microwaves don't heat food properly anyway. It's always cold in the middle, so it's crap.
True.
But it's so prevalent. Like, it's such a convenient thing. Like, I've never really been part of the corporate world, but I have friends who are, and ex-partners or whatever. And you hear tales of like what they do. They're all sitting around the kitchen with the microwave going left, right, and center. And I'm just like, wow, like the world is just so oblivious to how bad this stuff is there. Which I guess probably comes back to the original kind of question about messaging in the mainstream. Like, no one talks about this stuff. It's almost like they don't want us to be healthy.
Yeah. Funny that. There's not a lot of money to be made in healthcare, in healthy people, I mean.
No, there's not. I mean, to be fair, if everyone was healthy, we'd be out of a job, which...
That's true.
That's true. But we'd find something else to do, and we'd be happy doing it, I think. So
unless we just continue to optimize people's health.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so endocrine disrupting chemicals, anything else that men need to focus on?
A couple of things that I generally, especially if we're looking to try and improve testosterone levels in general, strength training and sprinting are very, very good. So high intensity, longer rests, anaerobic based exercise, very, very good for not just for testosterone, but for muscle development, energy synthesis, mood, performance, etc. But also too, probably the biggest thing, and that's, I always say this is the closest thing to a magic pill we'll ever have on this earth, is actually getting a good night's sleep. There's been studies done on a cohort of, I think it was mid-20, thereabouts-year-old men who were sleeping between 5 and 6 hours a night. And they basically showed that their testosterone production dropped by somewhere between 15 to 40%. Wow. Just because they weren't getting a good night's sleep.
I don't know how people function on 5 to 6 hours sleep.
Oh, neither do I. I don't function on anything less than 7. And even then I'm grumpy. So
I hear you. So guys, put the phones down at night and go to bed.
Definitely put the phones down at night, put on some nice, comfortable bamboo cotton boxer shorts
Yeah.
and just relax. And I think that's one thing. Like, we need to get away from, if we're trying to conceive, we need to get away from technology as much as possible. We need to get back out into nature, get your feet on the earth, go and pick things up, climb on rocks, jump in the water, go for a swim, run, lift weights, be what we used to be, what our grandparents' generation used to do when they're outside building things. They, get in the garden. We're too stuck inside in front of screens these days, and it's really showing in terms of health and well-being and fertility. Like, fertility as a general it's plummeting. Like, the birth rates around the world are falling off a cliff to the point where the population, I'm sure you've heard the statistics, for the population to kind of continue at its same level, every woman on this planet needs to have 2.1 children. Then you look at the birthing rates in pretty much every country around the world, it's well below 2, especially in Asian countries where it's in Japan and China where it's like 1.1, if not lower. I think the last stats in Australia was like 1.6 or 1.7.
Such a big change. And we're having children later. Not everyone, but a lot of people are having children later as well. Crazy to think of those changes. But I definitely agree with you, just like on the getting out in nature, getting away from screens and things. Like, we are just becoming more and more sedentary, spending far too much time in front of screens and technology. And also, this is a little bit off topic, but we need to set a good example to our children if we are in that preconception fertility phase. Like, think about your future children and setting that good example for them, because they watch everything that we do.
That's a really big one. And, like, fortunately, one of the gyms that I worked at when I was back in Melbourne was a very high-end kind of personal training studio. And my old boss, Dave O'Brien, who I credit for a lot of my development over the years, very, very switched on guy. We always let people come in with their kids, and the kids would kind of just sit around and they could see what everyone was doing. And I think that really, like you said, when the kids see us doing it, then it becomes natural for them. Whereas if parents are just sitting on the couch all day watching TV, then that's all they're going to want to do. They don't think that exercising is normal, it's hard work. When it's, I love it, you love it, and if your kids see you doing it, they're going to think, oh, this looks fun. And they're going to try it themselves. And it's quite cute to watch them, to be honest.
It's so cute. My husband actually swapped a couple of his gym sessions for like at-home functional sessions. So we live across the road from like a park area, and he bought a whole heap of equipment like kettlebells and all sorts of functional stuff. And so he will come home and do a couple of sessions a week at home with the kettlebells. My son will get out. They both get in their bare feet to run around the grass and do training. And he's never tried to encourage him to like do anything, like, because he's so young, he's barely 3, but just from seeing him he wanted to get involved. So now, like, he's bought him some little baby kettlebells and he like carries things around, like nothing structured, nothing is pushed on him at all. It is really just letting him do whatever he wants out there. But it's just really like cute to see that he's like, oh cool, this is what we do, or pick things up and lift heavy things with dad.
It's so cute to see. And like, when my old house back in Melbourne, during COVID, I fit out the garage as a full-on gym setup because obviously the gyms were closed. And my next door neighbour, who was 4 years old, he'd come, as soon as he saw me outside, he'd come running out the front door, come charging straight into the garage and just want to pick up the kettlebells and throw the balls around. And like, they love it. It's so good to see. And I think, the more kids are seeing their parents doing these types of things, like I said, they're going to fall into it themselves naturally, which is going to mean, I think, as we know, that the health divide is only going to get further and further apart. So I think setting your kids up, or setting an example for your kids when they're at that age, is going to be so important, because you're setting them up for a healthy life.
Yeah. And it creates a lifestyle as well. I always think about, both for us as parents and then for the kids, it just creates this normalcy around healthy lifestyles just being just what we do every day.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do as a community and a society. We need to go back to doing more of that. I'm a huge advocate in the sense that I think technology, whilst it's great for certain things, has definitely gone too far. Like, we don't need half of what we have today. And you look at the damage that social media has done, whether to communities, relationships, families, expectations in terms of health and well-being, with all these fitness influencers out there with, six packs and, ridiculous looking bodies. And it's like, that we don't need to look like that. We just need a healthy, functional body. I think the more we get back to basics, the healthier we'll be as a population and the more fertile we'll be.
For sure. I wanted to dive a little bit into blood testing or functional testing as well, because I know you mentioned about sperm analysis, and I know you're really big on blood chemistry testing. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how testing can help to identify any like gaps in health or any concerns when it comes to men's health?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, blood chemistry it's a really big part of my practice. I generally don't work with any new clients unless I have a copy of their blood chemistry. The simple reasoning is you can take a whole bunch of symptoms from a client and you'll get pretty much most of the truth, but you don't know how it's manifesting at a biochemical level. So when you get the blood testing alongside their symptom history, then you can see how it's manifesting, as I said, whether it's deficiencies, whether it's imbalances, whether it's overabundance. And then when you've got that information, then you can sit there and start to address it from that biochemical perspective, whilst also kind of working on their lifestyle and diet and nutrition. So I guess the big thing for me is like I see a lot of nutritional deficiencies. That's the one big thing I see a lot of. And if you're looking to try and increase testosterone levels or improve your sperm health, we need to be aware of what you're deficient in, because if you don't have the building blocks to build testosterone or create testosterone within the body, how are you going to produce more sperm? How are you going to be healthier? How are you going to have an increased libido? So for me, it's just, I guess it's one of the things why I'm so big on increasing people's nutrient intake, is because I'm just seeing a population that's chronically deficient. And when you correct that, then all of a sudden people start thriving again. It makes my job a lot easier. That's what I will say. I was going to say quickly too, relative to hormones, like as I mentioned before, testosterone levels in men are plummeting. Like I've got a client that I'm working with now. I got one guy in his 50s who was sitting, I think, a healthy testosterone or serum testosterone level. I want at least 23, 24. He was sitting in his 50s and he was sitting at 6. Then I had another guy who's I think he's 28, 29, and he's sitting at about 12. And I'm sitting there going like, dude, how do you have any life about you? Like, we need to get on top of this. So I think this type of testing, especially if someone is looking to conceive, becomes really, really important, because if you're deficient in things like cholesterol or zinc, you need this to produce like all your steroid-based hormones like testosterone. So if you're trying to get your testosterone levels up so you can conceive or increase your sperm health, but you're not putting the actual nutrients and precursors in that build these things, it's just not going to happen. And then people end up going down the IVS route and spending tens of thousands of dollars and with very, very little success when the foundational stuff has never been addressed.
Yeah, I think that's a really big issue, and it's such a touchy one, because I know how emotional the fertility space is and working in that space, but it's also so frustrating to see. I really feel for these couples that go round in circles, not getting adequate testing through the mainstream, not even having a conversation around the real basics for fertility, and for their overall health, and then ending up down that pathway when potentially there was a lot that could have been done before then.
Yeah, I think it's important for both parties to, if you're trying to conceive, like, get this type of testing done straight off the bat so you know where you stand. Because so much of this stuff can be corrected. And it literally comes back to basics, correcting nutrition, reducing stress, a little bit of supplementation to correct these imbalances here and there. And if you do that, you're setting yourself up for a much greater chance of success. Like I had a friend who I knew, still friends with her, but she was in her mid-30s and was trying to conceive her first, and she had 4 early pregnancy losses. Now, that's obviously not good. There's something amiss, but her partner never once had his sperm tested, which I think is insane. It's like, dude, it literally, she feels terrible because she feels like she can't carry a child. But at the same point, like, dude, there might be something wrong with his sperm, which is inhibiting the fertilization process. So that's why I'm always an advocate for men. I think men get a really bad rap in society in general today. But this is one aspect where I'm really kind of coming down on guys and saying, no, we need to actually be better here, because so much of the pressure and stress and onus the weight of the world sits on the girl's shoulders. When theoretically, guys, all we need to do is go and spend 5 minutes in the room with a cup, watch a movie, and get our tested to see if it's actually is something that we could be doing, or it's us that's holding the fertility process back.
Yeah. And I think the important point is that, like you said, there is so much that can be done, that we can do to improve. If you have a blood test or have a sperm analysis or any other test come back and something's not as optimal as it should be, there's so much that we can do to support your health and to improve it for better outcomes as well.
Yeah, and like I said, the majority of guys that you work with, for us guys, it is relatively simple compared to our hormone system is much more simple than females. So to correct a lot of these issues, it is actually relatively easy to do. And it's not like you need to completely become a monk. It's more just, eliminate some of that, eat more of that, put in a few of these, and, 3, 6 months, 12 months down the track, you're laughing.
Amazing. Anything else you wanted to touch on with men's health?
I think we kind of covered most of that today, but the one thing that we really need to find a way, and this is something that I'm struggling to get more men in. It's always the ongoing battle. The old she'll be right, mate, until it's not right. And I think one of the pathways that I've found that works really well is if we're talking to men about this space, instead of kind of heaping pressure on, especially from the female or the partner's kind of perspective, it's like, instead of pushing and pressuring and nagging on top of him, it's just like, look, this is going to benefit you. This is going to benefit me. You're going to perform better. You're going to feel better, X, Y, Z. I think the messaging needs to kind of change towards men, because so much of the health messaging out there today is directed to a female audience. And the way men receive information, the way women receive information is completely different. And I think we need to kind of focus and shift it a bit more to guys, as opposed to, no, there's something wrong with you, you need to fix it. It's like, hang on, no, you're not at your best. Let's make you better. And I think most guys will resonate with that a lot more than being pushed in the corner and say, no, you're not good enough.
Yeah. I love that messaging. Tell us then, how can we find you online? How can men, couples, people reach out to work with you?
Yeah, sure. So I literally just relocated from Melbourne up to the Sunshine Coast like a week ago. Time for me to get out of the big city and just get the lifestyle the way that I want it. But I'm definitely still working in an online capacity. I work with Miranda Miles at Freya Health, which is based in Albert Park. So we're working with them ongoing as well. So you can find me there. The easiest way to find me, though, is jump onto my website, which is andylucas.com.au, or my Instagram handle is The Healthy Man Exists. I'm not as proficient as posting on Instagram as I need to be, but I go through spits and spurts. But you can definitely get in contact with me through there. If you have any questions, concerns, just want to reach out, by all means. I'd love to hear from people more, especially men. Like, the more we can help men, the more we can get more babies out into this world, the more society will be a better place.
Love it. And I will share all the links to where you're at online in the show notes. But yeah, really appreciate your knowledge, your wisdoms that you've shared with us today. And for any guys listening, just pass this on to your other friends. Like, let's get this word out there. We need to support our men as well, and they get forgotten about. And it's all about feeling your best and optimizing your whole life, not just about fertility. And like you said, not just about having something wrong with you. It's not that at all. It's actually that you could feel really, really good and perform at the best and optimize your health and your life and feel really good in that.
Yeah, it sounds a bit kind of wanky, but just being the best version of yourself. Like, we can always strive to be that little bit better, and whether it's mentally, physically, sexually, like it's when you feel good, like you perform good, life is good. So, get stuck into it, boys.
Thanks for joining us on the Empowered Flow podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd love you to share it with a friend and take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support means the world and fuels our mission to empower women everywhere. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at TrisAlexandraNutrition. Sending big love. I'll catch you in the next episode.